but that could have been just more of like a comfort pick, maybe just some styling on their opponents. It's kind of hard to tell. I do wonder what they're going to be able to do in this Plaguefall. Making sure that both of these teams get their first pull done cleanly is what you need to see, because that first pull can be so volatile.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of runs for Plaguefall, usually viewed as an easier dungeon, but people put a ton of pressure on themselves and make this dungeon extremely hard to get it done that quickly. Let's see what we got as Complexity and Practice are squaring off in game number 1.
Alright, so it looks like no Resto Druid for this dungeon here, as both Complexity and Practice are running the same comp, with the Vengeance Demon Hunter, the Frost Mage, plus the Rogue and the Windwalker. And of course the Holy Paladin. No more Resto Druids just yet, as we see them pull that Tormentor pack, as well as some trash on top of each other. I think they might be doing the exact same trash count here, and it can be pretty dangerous because there's a bunch of casts you actually need to interrupt, and then on top of that you also have bursting that you have to worry about, plus also the Tormentor that needs to be interrupted.
Yeah, and I mean, we're seeing for the first time I think all weekend teams running mirror comps. I almost wonder if like teams just play comfort picks on day one, because they technically should be able to beat their opponents even if they aren't playing a perfectly, like, I don't know, optimal comp. So I don't know. I'm interested to see that now. But here's something we haven't been seeing from most teams at all. Check it out. They're keeping the Fungalmancer alive, and they're going for that mage buffing strategy on the side of Complexity here. Big problem for Practice here, though, as they pull the boss and instantly lose their healer. They have a battle res, but remember, they don't have any natural battle reses on their team, so one of them has to take the time to get that battle res off on the healer with the engineering res, and because of that, Riku ends up going down. That's a pod tender procced on the mage as well. Gonna be able to keep him alive, but that's DPS down, or 2 DPS down now. For the entire first boss, they're just going to have to reset this boss. There's no way you're going to DPS through this boss with only 1 DPS alive.
Yeah, that death here in the Paladin was devastating. I'm pretty certain he had already popped his Ashen when he went down. Bloodlust plus Ashen already down, and then he goes down. That's the healing they need to make this pull possible, because they had all of these slimes on top of each other on the boss as well, which means there's going to be so much bursting stacks going off. And then not having Ashen and somebody having to rest the healer with an engineering rest halfway through just caused them to wipe there. And unfortunately the mage was in the pot tender, and then the frontal was casted onto that pot tender, just not able to recover from this. Very, very unfortunate for Practice, as they're going to be losing a lot of time from this one. Have to reset the boss, go again, lost Bloodlust, lost a lot of offensives. Complexity, on the other hand, they are done with their first pull pretty smoothly with that 16% trash that they pulled there, and now Globgrog almost done as well.
Well, and this is the thing about the 21 Tyrannical, right, is that you're going to get those second set of ads if you don't perfectly keep up the buff on your mage, which they clearly have not. They ditched that a while ago. They only had the first initial buffs. And if these morsels are able to make it into the boss,
that looks
so yeah, that big ad almost made it to the boss. And it's funny because they only have 2 CCs available on their team to deal with those big ads. They have the Paralyzed from the Monk, and then after that they have to rely on Turn Evil from the Paladin, which is just a fear, and almost just got RNG pathed into the boss, which would have healed the boss.
Yeah, thankfully that didn't happen, as they're now moving on to I want to say smaller trash pull, but you have the Plague Rock in here and also the Spinebreaker, and those are actually pretty dangerous to deal with because they have double frontals, so that's something you want to watch out for. And then afterwards, you're probably going to gear up for a little bit of a bigger pull once they have some more cooldowns available that they just used on the boss, of course. But they were that pull just died really quickly. Of course, it is tyrannical, so the mobs don't have more HP, but it's still at 21, so that's still something you have to look out for. And additionally, neither of the teams actually are playing a priest. No Shadow Priest or Disc Priest in their group, so that means they're gonna have a little bit of a harder time dealing with those bursting stacks. But a lot of them are playing Dwarf. That means they can just use that Dwarf racial to get rid of those stacks.
Yeah, I mean, using the dwarves on specifically bad pulls, and they also have a couple of immunities to deal with them as well. Also, Diffuse Magic is a pretty useful tool on the Monk as well, so most of the DPS should be totally fine, and you can see they're actually just using all those immunities there. Cloak of Shadow's gone, Ice Block gone, probably Diffuse used on the Monk as well. Just helping out their healer, helping out the Bucko so he can do more damage, which is what Paladins are really meant to do.
Yeah, unfortunately, Practice just not having a good one again. As their tank goes down, it's going to be another full wipe. Unfortunately, there's no way they can recover without those battle rests available. And it looked like they must have pulled a Belcher that they didn't want to pull, and then you just had too many ads coming in that they're unable to see. And this is something we just talked about, right? You don't have a lot of CC for the slimes that cannot reach the boss. And if you don't have Bloodlust, you don't have Ashen, you don't have those offensive cooldowns, then all of a sudden the boss takes quite a lot longer, and you're just running out of CC. And at some point, those ads are just going to run through to the boss. So that might have been what happened here for Practice, on top of also having that ad that they pulled too. So just disaster for Practice. Complexity though, they are moving on. Still a clean run by them. 0 deaths, 51% trash now. And once this mini boss goes down, they're going to be moving on. They also have the second set of Plague Borers that they are carrying along to make sure it helps them with this congealed slime pack. Because this pack usually is a little bit annoying to deal with because of that damage reduction aura that slime has.
Yeah, exactly. So they're doing a pretty good job so far. I mean, Complexity, we were watching them a little bit beforehand, and they were having some issues in this particular section of the dungeon. They do a pull with Dr. Ickis that we've seen a few other teams do, pretty scary. But they also do this, one of the things a lot of teams do that we don't really highlight that much is they make sure they pull the boss over to this red sludge on the ground whenever you kill that red slime, and you can stand in that for a massive haste buff. Fired Up is using it. It looks like he's the only one that's going to be using it. Actually, no, Lip is going to dip in there as well, get some of that haste buff as well. And that's just extra damage on the group. So once these ads go down, you get a bunch of bursting stacks. They don't have their immunities up just yet, because they used them on that original pack a little while ago. Actually, no, they use the Cold Snap too, and they do have the Cloak backup, so they should be totally fine on the immunity front for whenever that first bomb goes off. But yeah, it's actually a little bit more of a dangerous pull than we give it credence to. I mean, there's definitely ways to wipe here that we don't normally see, but, you know, it just goes to show that a lot of these big pulls that we're seeing are kind of on a knife's edge, and if any one thing goes wrong, there's a lot of easy ways to wipe.
Yeah, definitely. And now they are, of course, as you said, focusing the boss and not the Plague Bomb, as they have their immunities back up. So they're going to be committing those for whenever this Plague Bomb explodes. And then very likely they are going to focus the boss even on that last platform and ignoring the second Plague Bomb too. But if they do that, then they are on a timer because they don't have 2 immunities, right? So they can only immune this first bomb. The second one, they have to just kill the boss before it goes off, which can sometimes be problematic if they don't deal with the congealed slime properly, because again, they don't have as much to see. They have the Incap, and they also have the blind from the rogue. But once, if one of those gets broken, if the black gets broken, then all of a sudden they are in trouble. They have that turn evil from the paladin, but that can really be hit or miss because it can just walk into random directions, and the boss maybe jumps close to it and still gets the aura. The Ring of Key is being used here by Shakib, making sure the slime is gone, and the Incap as well. And yeah, it looks great. As long as the slime is not close by, then they should be definitely having enough damage to finish up the boss here.
Yep, and that's never going to happen with that paralysis on it in the corner unless somebody decides to go and troll and hit it with like a random chi burst or something. I don't know if they play that talent anymore. I guess they... okay, I can look it up if I wanted to, but I'm way too lazy to do that while we're casting. One of the things that I like focusing with Complexity, and this has kind of been eating at me the entire time, is trying to figure out whatever random harebrained name scheme they come up with. Like, you've got people... Wait, did they just pull Tentacle? They just pulled a Tentacle.
Yeah.
JB! Come on, man.
I think they... yeah, it looks like they're just committing to kill it instead of...
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing they could do is, you know, death skip, but they don't really have a battle rest class, so that might take a while. We only have 1 Shadow Melt on Scott, on the Vengeance Demon Hunter. So yeah, I think they just decided to kill it, which... Maybe there's something that they can skip later on, so they don't go over %. That is something that... JB actually going down too, as he got hit by one of those volcanics, and they're just all sitting in this slime, taking a huge amount of damage from the debuff as well, and the Lip going down too, and Shakib, so they're up to 3 deaths at this point. Everyone released. They just have to walk back. But yeah, this is actually a decent amount of time loss. Thankfully for Complexity, Praxis is having even more issues on their side, so they're definitely still in the lead. But this is something that cannot happen if they play against a team that doesn't have any issues, or if they maybe go against Ambition later. So definitely have to clean up those small mistakes there.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Practice did get the first boss down. literally so far behind in trash, not anywhere close to the nice percent that complexity is at right now. But like I was saying, I was trying to figure out the name scheme, because the names of the characters that can actually be pretty useful as casters, right? Like if you've got somebody like Lip, who's look at his name, he's Lip, he's on a rogue, and then DV, he's on a dwarf, and he's Venthyr. Like that's great. Why can't everyone have that name scheme? So I know exactly what they're playing without having to look it up. Then you got people like Shaq, who just randomly has Snuts backwards after his name. No idea what that's there for. And then you've got Scott, who just goes with jeans and beans and whatever bit he wants to throw in for some reason. It's just, help us out, guys. We're trying to do our job well here.
Yeah, what's Fired Up's?
He's just got random animals at the end of his name. I don't know. His hunter is Fired Up Eagle. This is Fired Up Chow. I mean, I know Chow is another mage, but I don't know why Chow. I don't understand.
I don't get it. Maybe he doesn't even understand himself, to be honest with you. But
He
it looks like
doesn't
Complex is
understand
actually doing a huge pull. As they're gathering up basically this whole room except the sniper in the corner, plus Domina Venom Blade. So lots of damage coming into the group here with the bursting, plus the damage from the boss. So I assume JB was putting down the Ashen as well. As you can see in the damage meter, whenever you're in doubt if a paladin used Ashen or not, you just glance at the damage meter. It's like, oh yeah, they did use Ashen. So the trash is now that they're just getting this sniper in the corner as well, and then they should be able to finish up this boss just nicely. But yeah, this is a difficult pull, and it looked pretty easy when they did it, but it's definitely really hard to deal with all of this trash and the boss too.
JB got the stun there, which put him very far behind on healing. Almost went down himself. Ended up having to blow the lay on Scott there to keep him alive and not proc his cheat. That was a little scary, but looks like everything is back to normal now. JB saying, I'll bet JB's talking to his team right now and being like, guys, if I was on a druid, this healing would be so much easier right now.
I mean, he's not wrong.
You wouldn't be wrong.
One thing to note about this pull as well with Domina Venom Blade is that I think we've seen this before. I think it was on the Great Push, where we've seen a bunch of times the healer got the stuns back to back to back, and that's like the biggest issue with this pull. If you're unlucky and your healer keeps getting that stun, then that's where things can go wrong really quickly, because there's so much damage in a group with all of those ads still alive. And again, JB getting that stun on him, it's actually they're not winning the RNG here, as Complexity just keeps getting that stun on their healer, trying to keep everyone alive. He's even out of mana at this point. Thankfully the boss is really low, so he should be able to finish it off. But yeah, this is really the RNG that you don't want. You don't want
Dude,
this stun on the healer every single time.
Look at the little smirk that's like coalescing on Fired Up's face. He's just like he was just like ready to laugh. You could see it was happening there. I'll bet JB was complaining about getting every single stun. I can just imagine
Probably.
the things that are going on in their voice chat right now after that happens. Ooh. Yep. I forgot what I was going to say after that, but yeah, there we go. Oh, right. You were talking about how he doesn't even know what he's thinking about.
Yeah.
I remember somebody in his chat once asked him, "Hey, Fired Up, do you think in the same voice you talk in?" And that like blew his mind for the next about hour. Like he was stun locked. It's like other people.
So what was the answer in the end?
Their head? He doesn't know. He says he doesn't hear voices in his head.
Amazing. The kind of stories that you hear from Fired Up.
Yep.
You can write a book about it. Either way, Complexity now in that last boss room, dealing with this room pretty slowly. It is bursting after all, so you don't necessarily want to pull everything all at once. You could theoretically pull everything all at once if you would manage to kill them all at the same time, because then you can just use that dwarf racial to get rid of it. But that is really difficult because the mobs are super spread out, and it's not like you have 3 Moonkins that have Starfall or something. So it would be really hard to kill them all at once. That's why they're just going a little bit slower, and it's not really speeding up this room anyway to kill them fast, because the highest HP mob is the mini boss, Dr. Ickes. So you want to make sure that you're actually. His name is not Dr. Ickes, that's the boss name. I forgot what the name was. Either way, once that one is that, the boss spawns, so it doesn't really matter how fast you kill the smaller HP mobs.
Iker Bile?
Iker, maybe. Yeah, Iker.
I think that's right.
His name, exactly. Yep.
Something like that. It is close to Dr. Ickis, though. That's for dang sure. Look at that! Look at that infectious range damage on the group, though. Paladin having a lot of trouble healing that. You have to remember, they have all of those debuffs from the 3 tormented affixes that they did not kill. They really want to do their best to make sure they're out of combat here, killing off that spawned at the last second. Really unfortunate for them. Shavy's going to have a really tough time healing up the group if they all have this healing reduction debuff on them, and they're going to have it for almost the entire intermission phase.
Yeah, I think this might actually be a little bit of a problem for them. They do have Bloodlust that they can commit here for the second phase as soon as the boss comes back up, but you can see how low they are still just because of this 50% healing reduction that they had this whole time. So now, okay, the Ashen has been popped, so they should be okay. Ashen is probably going to be out healing that damage even with the 50% healing reduction, and as long as they're getting through this phase quickly without too many ticks of the rain, they should be okay. But yeah, this is definitely really scary. If something goes wrong on this boss with those triple Tormentor debuffs, 50% slow, 50% physical damage increase, and 50% healing reduction, while it's a tyrannical boss as well, so that Infectious Rain does a huge amount of damage to the whole group. So many things can go wrong. It's a damage check, first of all, because if you don't do enough damage, you get more and more Infectious Rain casts. And on top of that is, of course, also a survivability check, making sure you have those defensives available for the rain when it does come out. It looks like they are doing well as they're now in that last phase.
Yeah, and usually we see teams use their Ashen Hollow Wings in this phase after the Lust was already popped in phase 2, but it looks like they just wanted to commit that in P2 just to try to catch up, I guess, since they needed to get through the debuffs. So this phase is going to last a little bit longer than usual, but that should be totally fine for them because they actually have all of their immunities available. So first rain came out, block, cloak, diffuse, everything's gone, and not going to be an issue for them here as they end up taking the first game against Practice here.
That's right, Complexity taking the victory. Couple deaths they had in there, but like we've kind of talked about before, Tails, this can be an extremely dangerous dungeon because of how much teams are able to pull together, how aggressive they're trying to be. And hey, I mean, like we said at the very end, having 3 Tormentor debuffs on the last boss is just no joke.
Yeah, it felt like the difficult parts of this dungeon were handled really well by Complexity. Their deaths and like problems came from Ninja pulling a tentacle, which was kind of weird. I think that we can just write that off as just like an accident that's not going to happen again in the future. As for Practice, they got their first pull done so fast. I was like, oh man, this is actually insane. And then their healer got meleeed by Globgrog and died, and then the whole entire group died to bursting and subsequent damage. And then from then on out, Practice kind of had their run thrown apart by that. I think that Practice just needs to like retool, try to clear some tilt that may be facing them. They're going into DOS here in just a little bit, but they just need to make sure that they are continuing to stay focused. Whilst for Complexity, they need to just like keep playing their game.
Yeah. Let's start going over that ninja pull. Do you have that one as well?
We do have the ninja pull. Yeah.
Yes.
So unfortunately, we don't have the practice wipe because replay was a bit off at the beginning or something. But Complexity pulling all of this trash into Dr. Ickis is absolutely phenomenal. This is a pull that is very dangerous, and making sure that this spine breaker is going down. You do see Fired Up standing in that haste bubble as well. So there's a lot that's going on there. And then, yeah, JB accidentally just ninja pulls this tentacle. I think legend has it that Shakib had to run and go get his door today. I don't really know what exactly happened with the tentacle, but one thing led to another, and they had 3 deaths on this guy. That tentacle is really doomed. And, yeah, like you were talking about as well, triple tormented buff with Margrave Stradama. It's no joke. And being able to just pull that off. They looked really good for the parts of the dungeon that you would expect them to make mistakes in. Sure, they could absolutely get punished if a team was in position to punish something like that, like Ninja pulling that tentacle. But at the same time, for the MDI style caliber pulls that they needed to perform on, they were always there and they looked really good.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing as well as I would always kind of press upon is that not all deaths are equal, right? And some of the best teams, when they do have those deaths, they minimize the time loss, they minimize the chance of it becoming a full wipe, they minimize any sort of drag down on the overall dungeon, you know?
And that can be through any number of ways, right? Like, usually good teams will find ways to make it so that their deaths have less impact by playing the rest of the dungeon well, so you actually have your battle rests for when you need them and not having just random deaths throughout the course of the dungeon. That's typically how we see our top end teams really kind of recover from those terrible situations. But it just looks like that wasn't really the case in this dungeon. I mean,
Yeah.
there was just one silly thing that Complexity did, and it really didn't matter in the grand scheme of things because practice was just way too far behind. I mean, we're not talking about practice anymore. This is the game.
We're talking about the game.
They don't have
That's
time
right.
to practice anymore.
Yeah, no more practice.
Talk
Game.
about the game, not
The
practice.
game, all right? I'm supposed to be the franchise. Okay. Nagura, as we go on to 21 DOS, we've got another bursting dungeon and another Hydrash density dungeon as well. Tons of bursting stacks going through here.
Yeah, so we actually already saw practice in the other side yesterday. They did win against Baguette. They got a 25 minutes and 40 seconds timer there with only 2 deaths. So it looked like their route worked out the way they wanted to, and it still took them 25 minutes, which, to be honest, in a 21-40 fight, the other side, it, you know, that might just be the amount of time you need to clear this dungeon. It is a pretty long one, but then I'm actually excited to see what Complexity can do here and how they can save some time possibly, because it really looked like practice was pretty clean in that dungeon. So I do have high hopes for practice doing well here, but then again, 25 minutes just seems like it's so long. So I wonder if Complexity comes up with something crazier.
Well, one of the issues with practice's run yesterday is the fact that they weren't able to phase the Muzala ads. That seemed really bad. I wonder if they've like retooled their strategy to not lose just a minute and a half because of that, because that really does feel like a massive time loss.
Well, also, let's keep in mind that the other side is also going to be played in the whoever wins this series goes to the semifinals, and they're also going to have to play this map. So I have like astronomically high expectations for Complexity for this. They're coming in as our top seed for it as well, Zyro, and I'm expecting this to be like blazing fast, super amazing, you know.
Well, also, this was a time trial dungeon, and yes, there were slightly different affixes, but still a 21 DOS and
It was
time trials.
fortified?
And Well, I don't remember what it was, to be honest with you, but Complexity was one of the teams that was at the forefront of strategy for this. They were the team that put up a time that was a minute and a half faster than anybody else, and they did it with the Resto Druid. It had everyone scratching their heads wondering what the hell they were doing. And eventually, Holy Paladin comps overtook them by like 30 seconds, but in terms of strategy and DOS, I would expect Complexity, because of that, to pretty much be at the forefront of the speedrun stats they're doing. And if they actually did implement the Holy Paladin into their strategy, they could be even faster than they were in time trials.
That's true. I mean, unless, like you said, they have some kind of special Resto Druid tech that's going to be coming along, where I guess they would be taking advantage of those Night Elf Shadow Melts and stuff, Tettles.
So one of the big things about composition for this dungeon, they ran Resto Druid, but they also ran Double Mage in here. And I suspect that even though they ran Double Mage during time trials, it's bursting, so they're probably going to have to run a Priest of some form, whether that be a Disc Priest or a Shadow Priest. So I think that their composition is going to be changing up a lot from the time trials that they had practiced initially. So I do suspect that's going to be something that's different for Complexity, but as for practice, they need to just play clean.
Oh, they got the Holy Paladin. All right, let's see what we got in stores. Complexity is up 1 versus practice as the other side gets underway.
Yeah, so completely unsurprisingly, Tettles lied, and there's no priest in either of those comps. Moving into the left side. It looks like both of them are doing a very similar pull with the Death Speaker pack, and then also the Tormentor on top of that as well. So yeah, lots of interrupts that need to be done here. It is bursting storming, so yeah, they do have a lot of dwarves to get rid of those bursting stacks, but no priests to help them out with that dispel, so definitely have to be careful to not be rolling bursting stacks too high.
Yeah, important to mention again that we're seeing different strategies here. Practice went straight to the right to pull that incinerator right away, whereas Complexity opted to just go straight to the left and not worry about getting that buff right away, and are just going straight into Ardenweald. So if practice, this is what we saw practice do yesterday. They went to Hakar first, so this is just their strategy to do this. So there's not going to be any like major backtracking issues. I mean, that's a pretty typical live strat that you see a lot of teams do. Right, you'll kill the first pack in the front, go right, kill that one pack, get the first damage buff, and then after that, teams will circle back around through the front, go to Ardenweald, and start pulling that, because it's just kind of the most efficient place to get all your trash right away. And if you don't do that win well, you can just reset the dungeon. But can't reset in the MDI, got to get right into it and play the best you can. And Complexity is doing just that in the Ardenweald win here, going for a huge pull, probably about 20% of the count, and on top of that, pulling Execution of Aruth on top of it. But while we're talking, Practice has already had issues on their first major pull in the Car Wing. 2 deaths on the board for them.
Yeah, so unfortunately what happened was that somebody ninja pulled the Enraged Spirit, and since they're not playing a Night Elf comp, not all of them could reset aggro, and they just had to die there. So obviously a little bit of issues again for practice here to start, which is not good to start the dungeon off with. You don't want to see that happen. As Complexity, though, not having any issues at all on their pull, and this one was actually crazy. They had a lot of percentage down there with the Tormentor on top, so they're gonna pick up their power here. And they're going to be doing some more crazy pulls in the Ardent Wield area. This is really a standard thing to do for these MDI groups, just making sure they get as much percentage as possible in this Ardent Wield area so they can skip a lot of the other trash in the other wings, just because this one is so much more efficient to deal with. And we're probably also going to see an insane pull on top of Zayaxa as well, which is probably where they're going to be committing their Bloodlust.
Yeah, that's what I would assume they're saving it for. And that's not too big of a deal to save it for, 5 or 6 minutes into the dungeon, because what we know from DOS is that it's about a 19, 20-minute dungeon if played perfectly, which means you can delay your first Bloodlust by about 6, 7, 8 minutes, and you'll still have the second one up by the end of the dungeon, which is probably where they're going to be using it. I'd imagine they'd use that. Actually, they'd probably use it on Hakar, right? That's probably the safest place to use their second Bloodlust, so it should be back up by then.
Yeah, definitely should be, as they're just kiting out the mobs a little bit. Of course, the only person that actually has to worry about incoming damage from these trash pulls here is the tank. Because of that stacking up debuff, they will just increase the tank. Actually, everyone dropping incredibly low here. As well, does he have a pot? Because you do that as Fire Mage. I'm not sure if you actually also play Dreamweaver and Frost.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, so you does have that in case something does happen.
Yeah, it's especially nice for Frost since you don't have Cauterize to save you, right? So having a cheat dead, even if it's like not a great cheat dead, it's just kind of nice to have. And on top of that, just the haste buff from shifting, as well as the 3% increased damage that Dream Delver gives you is pretty much the best trait for any of the damage soulbands.
Yeah, and he's also the only Night Fae in this group, so he's also activating the urns, of course. No one else wanting to play that Covenant with the comp that they're playing. Practice now on Hakar. Did manage to clear that Hakar wing pretty fast, actually. So had some great pulls there. Now committing their Lust on Hakar. This boss can still be pretty dangerous, even on 45. It is at 21, so the boss has a lot of HP, and they're trying to commit as many cooldowns as possible here, because those Sons of Hakar can just go out of hand and just do a huge amount of AoE damage to the whole group. Complexity, just having more and more Ardent Wield pulls. You can see the huge amount of bursting stacks. All of the dwarf racials actually on cooldown at this point. I'm pretty certain they do just assign them for certain pulls, right? Because if you look at the timer, all of them basically press it at the same time. So it might just be JB calling it, saying, just calling for everyone to use it. So it comes up at the same time as well. Because if someone uses it and then the other one doesn't use it, then all of a sudden you desync the dwarf racials, and then maybe somebody doesn't have it up when you do a pull. So definitely want to make sure that they're all synced, and then they can use their other immunities or other tools that they have to get rid of bursting on their own on other pulls if they feel like they need it.
Really unfortunate for here JB is they popped the Bloodlust with all the trash alive, but you look at that cooldown right underneath his character on the far right side there. Wings isn't up for another 5 or so seconds, so he's not going to be able to Ashen Wings for a little while here. Should come out any second now, unless he used it on trash earlier and I just completely missed it. Looks like he's just trying to keep his group top right now, though. I wonder if that is available. I'd imagine he would have popped it by now if it was. Yeah, I mean, I believe he used it on the Executioner pull, but I believe it should mean it come up. It should come up pretty much any second now. There it is. All right.
There we go.
Bang. just
there we go. Ashen
steal all the rest of the pad.
The last percentage of the trash, that's my damage. As they're actually moving it close to the edge of that Ashen, definitely want to make sure we move into it. As it's actually in the middle of the room. Is it still in? It should be. But it's actually... I'm not sure at this point. Maybe they just dragged it out of the Ashen. As they're just trying to kite around those Stormings as well. I think it actually is out. JB should be yelling right now to make sure Scott drags it back in to get that extra damage. As JB also has to commit the bubble here because of that lightning debuff that they're passing out. There we go, he's moving it back in. But at this point it's gone. So that's actually a bit unfortunate. Look at the damage. I'm pretty sure JB just lost quite a lot of damage during the Ashen.
Yeah, Scott just paying back JB for pulling that tentacle in the previous dungeon, pulling it right out of the Ashen. It's definitely what happened there. Because you can see these guys doing it and fired up and Shaq just laughing the entire time while he's doing it too. That's the kind of team mentality they have. Those two are just clowns in the best way possible.
Yeah, so it looks like Practice is just, eating up as they're gearing up for this pull in the Mechagon area. This is something we've seen them do yesterday. This is actually a pretty cool pull. They're waiting for the Haywire to go off on this drill. Then we'll see the Rogue pop that Cloak of Shadows, making sure he's just gonna DPS that by himself, while everyone else is dealing with the rest of this trash pool. And now the Dental Drill is being dragged in. They need to make sure it goes down now before it casts a second Haywire, but no problem at all, as it goes down really quickly with everyone switching focus to it. And yeah, I really like this pull. Pretty efficient.
Yeah, let's see if Complexity is going to go for that same pull here. I mean, it's a pretty typical pull. We saw teams do it last week. We saw teams do it in time trials. I'm pretty sure they're going to opt to go for the same thing. So let's keep an eye on... I kind of want to see a Mage POV here, see if we can see if Fired Up's going to be the one pulling. Because that's probably the most efficient person to do it. Let's see. Complexity gearing up for that pull just now. Are they just going to straight pull the Warlords in? Let's see. They might have had lip pull them, actually.
We see a Shadow Melt. Scott used Shadow Melt, so...
Oh, it was Scott, okay.
I assume he was the only one being in combat, maybe?
Yeah,
that would be a cool pull, though. I'd like to see them pull the Warlords into this pull.
That'd be psycho.
I like it.
Well, okay, so...
I mean...
It makes sense for their tank to do it, because they're not trying to pull the small ads, right? He Shadow Melted all of the trash off. No,
there's the
I
Raptors
lied.
coming in,
the
actually.
Raptors.
Oh!
Is that...
Is it Warlords
is that a
too?
Warlord in there?
Or is it only the Raptors?
Or is it just the... No, that's just the Bone
Just the
Soldier.
Raptors, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know why he was so big and enraged. I don't think I've ever seen... Maybe I just haven't ever paid attention to the character model before, because I'm a mage and I just look at the health bars. But, yeah, I mean... Did exactly that. Just Shadow Melted off the Warlords, pulled in the 5 mobs on top of the dog, and going to work. Same strat as before. Rogue deals with the dental drill, so they don't have to worry about the second Haywire cast, and textbook pull again from Complexity. And honestly, it looks like they dealt with it faster than Practice did, because they're doing a great job of DPSing down Arfar before any of those Headless Clients goes down.
Yeah, definitely looking really good for Complexity. Incredibly clean, as well as they're already up to 63% trash at this point. Of course, can't really compare the two teams at the moment because Practice took a completely different route compared to Complexity. But we know that Practice had some issues already, so I guess it would be safe to say, since Complexity didn't have any issue. Oh, okay, just as I say that, JB and Shaq go down, because I believe the slimes were still there. They didn't disappear just yet from that engineering button that was pressed. And this is actually a little bit of a problem for them, because they also aggroed the lubricator here. That means they cannot actually get JB up. Somebody would have needed to go back and use an engineering res, but that's too close probably to the other lubricators. I would have added that one too. And nobody has a normal res. Actually, Shakib has, but he died too.
He died too.
So both of the out-of-combat resses died here.
Yeah.
This is very unfortunate for them.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they pulled the lubricator on purpose, because they don't have any other way to fix the situation here, right? Like, there's no one that can res. They'd have to go back and use an engineering res, or they'd have to get by it on their own. So, yeah, really unfortunate. They didn't manage to make it back though, so shouldn't be too big of an issue for them.
Yeah, so it looks like they used an invisibility potion here on JB at least to get back here. Thankfully, they had it available because they had used the Shroud before. So they had that Invis pod ready to use, and nothing else happened. So yeah, a little bit of a time loss here for Complexity. I would say it's probably the same time loss at this point, right? The two deaths on Practice side, with Ninja pulling the Enraged Spirit, and the Complexity time loss would probably amount to the same time. So at this point, theoretically, they should be at the same level if their route is, similar speed. So we'll see how that turns out later on, as we're going to see them getting closer together in where they are at the dungeon. Complexity now making sure they deal with Millhouse and Maleficent. Practice already had dealt with that boss, so it looks like they wanted to skip this Enraged Spirit, but it maybe didn't work out. I'm not sure. It looks like teams want to avoid those spirits just because they're so inefficient to deal with, and it's so difficult to pull them on top of anything else just because they do so much damage with their rage cast.
Yeah, and again, it's really hard to understand specifically how close to each other these two teams are right now. It looks like, honestly, they're pretty close together. It's just so hard to gauge how close they are until they both end up getting to the final boss with the different paths they've taken. So the thing is, Practice does have to deal with the entire Ardenweald wing plus this trash pack in front of it, whereas Complexity only has to deal with the car hallway, which is significantly less trash, and honestly a pretty significantly shorter boss as well, considering you don't have to pull trash on top of it. So I still want to give the advantage to Complexity here, but it's just kind of hard to know how far ahead they actually are until the end. It's kind of a weird dungeon.
Yeah. It's actually really awkward to look at these kind of dungeons where there's different routes you can take, and then the teams actually do so. Because sometimes you have a dungeon where it's possible to take different routes, but something just established. There's like a meta that MDI teams are doing, and then they actually just both do the same thing. And then, of course, it's easier to determine who is ahead. But if you see something like that, where they split up immediately to start, Practice going right side, Complexity going left, at that point it gets really difficult to compare them, because Complexity, of course, already was in the Ardenweald area. So if you look at the trash percentage, it's such a huge advantage towards Complexity, but that's just because all of the trash that he can get in the Ardenweald area is so efficient and it's so fast. The trash in the rest of the dungeon is a lot less efficient, takes a lot longer to do. So Practice now getting into the Ardenweald area, they're going to be catching up very, very quickly. While Complexity still has to finish off Millhouse Mana Storm, and of course they also have to deal with Hakar as well. So they have to go to the Hakar wing and deal with that boss. Their last is going to come back up in a second, so they're probably going to be committing that there. And Practice last also coming out. Oh no, Shakib actually ninja pulled Sagadon here. Has to go down. Can immediately release because he's going to spawn in front.
Yeah,
even saved some time, but definitely not worth the 5 seconds on the board, unfortunately.
JB, you got to make that jump, mate. That was your third try. Hopefully he has the slow fall. He does. All good. No problems there, bud. And there we go. They're going to be skipping that Enraged Spirit. You can see Scott pulled it off to the left there, and going to be Shadow Melding it off as everyone neatly slips on by. Now the question is, are they going to be dealing with this trash pack now, or are they going to save it to cleave down with the boss? Question answered almost instantly. Pulled that Incinerator right on top of the Death Speaker plus the trash pack. As we saw before, this can be very dangerous. Got to make sure you get all of those Inferno casts plus as many of those Shadow Bolts from the Death Speaker as possible to keep your tank alive.
Yeah, definitely not an easy pull to do. Need to make sure you interrupt all of that stuff as well. You see the Shadow Course going through. Can be pretty dangerous on the tank, but they need those interrupts for the Inferno cast. That's obviously a lot more dangerous than that Shadow Core onto the tank. And Scott still has that cheat death available in case something does happen. One more thing to note as well, that I see a lot of them actually run that trinket. What is it called? The one that actually gives you minus sets if you're below 50% HP.
Oh,
Ocular Gland. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I think Shakib is running it, and I think Fired Up as well. And because you have bursting, they drop below 50 actually quite a lot on some of those bigger pulls. So JB, of course, trying to heal them out of that range pretty quickly so they don't have those negative stats. But you just hate to see it. You glance at the HP bars and you see the debuff pop up, and it's like, oh no, in the middle of your cooldowns, and it's just very unfortunate. Oh, they're lusting here actually. Wow.
Lusting for the AoE because they consider it a bigger DPS increase than using it on the boss. Interesting. I wonder if it was just a fat finger. I think if we had...
No, I think this is actually incredibly important because they pulled everything, and there's like 3 inspired mobs in here. Yeah, I think there's a bunch of inspired mobs, right? At least one.
Is inspired even on the affix pool for this dungeon? Pretty sure it's first thing still.
Oh, it's not inspired! Oh, true, that's not even the affix. Okay, I guess there's no inspired. Well then, I don't know. Maybe it was a fat finger after all.
If we had the player cam on Fired Up, we would have instantly known because he would have burst out laughing if he wasn't supposed to pop it there. Look at the bursting damage on the group, though. That last tick almost took down 2 of them. wouldn't have been that big of a deal. JP could have just popped a res on them. Just would have been 2 extra deaths on the board, but no deaths. And I guess it's not that big of a deal to not have less for this boss. If you do have the Ashen Wings, this boss was significantly nerfed in patch 9.1. They did a lot of changes to it to where he doesn't actually gain energy while the blood barrier is alive, so there's a lot more time between blood barriers. You have more time to kill adds, more time to do actually damage to the boss, so it's significantly easier, and you can see before the first barrier they even have the boss at half HP. Shouldn't be too big of a deal for them to get there.
Yeah, and at this point it's also pretty clear to say that Complexity is definitely ahead in the dungeon, because once they deal with that car here, they only have the last boss left, plus that 8% trash that they're going to be dealing with while fighting the boss after the intermission. Practice, though, on the other hand, they still have quite a lot of trash to go through, and also have to deal with Cyaxa. So Complexity, I would say 2 or 3 minutes even in the lead at this point. And at that point, I think it's just like a faster strat. The way they dealt with this Hakar trash as well, they just did it in one pull. They used some CC. There was some blinds on some of the mobs at the start, and then they just pulled everything else. I think they just CC'd one of the Hexers to make sure that those healing waves don't need to be interrupted, and then they just pulled everything else on top of each other and just AoE nuked it down with that Bloodlust. While Practice, they had to do this pull in 2, so they had to split it up in 2 pulls to be able to deal with it, which of course cost them a lot of time. Now they're using the Shroud to skip that backwards. Yeah, see, this is the trash that they skipped, making sure that they just have a Cecine thrown on there, and then everything else they just pulled into this one big pull with the Lust.
Yeah, and I mean, this is where you can see where the actual gap actually is between the two teams, right? Complexity is about to pull Mozella.
Right, so it looks like they are moving onto the boss now. And yeah, as I said, the 8% that they have still on the board, that's just something they're going to be... That's the trash that they skipped at the very start of the dungeon, so they're gonna be dealing with it once they have that haste buff from the boss after the intermission phase. The only thing that can really slow them down, again at this point, is if they don't deal with the visages in the intermission. And surprisingly, we actually see teams struggle with that quite a lot. So teams sometimes just don't have the damage to deal with it. We'll see if Complexity can do that. In fact, we saw Practice have issues with it yesterday. Practice only managed to kill 3 out of the 4 visages, and then it increased their boss kill by like 1 minute or something like that. So they definitely have to make sure that nothing like that happens again for Complexity here. But even then, they are still pretty far ahead. Practice still fighting Cyaxa, committing that Bloodlust for the trash plus Cyaxa pool.
Yeah, and I think I was saying that, I don't know if I dropped Unity for a second there, but looks like, I mean, this is where you can really see well, you can't hear me, but I'm going to keep talking. This is where the lead has opened up for the teams, right? Looks like Complexity has gotten a pretty large lead here. Practice just now dealing with Cyaxa, but Complexity already onto the intermission phase, and it's going to be pretty much an easy victory here for Complexity. The time is not quite what we expected from the teams, though. I mean, we were kind of expecting maybe a sub-20 run from Complexity, based off of what we saw from them in time trials. I mean, they had like pretty much on the dot a 20-minute time, but not going to be the case here. I mean, I think these affixes are a little bit more annoying than last week. A lot more time has to be spent healing people up from bursting, and storming can cause your tanks to kite around a lot as well. But last pull of the dungeon this is going to be the last breakpoint for Complexity to deal with here as they pull this trash on top of the boss. But of course, they also have like 200% boost to deal with that as well.
Yeah, so actually, oh, yeah, they did. Okay, so they did manage to get all of those visages done, of course. You can see the 4-stack buff on them, or debuff rather, that gives them that haste. And you can see how fast Mozella is actually melting too, down to 13% already, as they're actually, it looks like they're even cleaving off of the boss. So they're very confident in their ability to deal with this trash. You don't even have to focus it down. Scott having some issues as he's just kiting around a little, making sure he's not taking too much damage from this trash. But there we go, Mozella going down even before the trash does, it looks like almost. Fired up, actually blinking a little bit too late, proccing that pot tender. Did, of course, pot tender saving him there. No more AoE happening because the boss goes down. And there it is. Complexity, 21 minutes, 29 clear off this DOS. Winning that series against Practice 2-0.
That's right. And again, a couple deaths and everything that we mentioned, like you said, the Plaguefall run as well, but they did a really good job of making sure that it didn't kind of compound or add any sort of extra problems. They were about 4 minutes or 3.5 minutes faster, Settles, than the practice run that we saw yesterday.
Yeah, and I think that they were going to be about 3 minutes ahead of where the practice run was going to be today. It just comes down to the fact that they were a